Hello and welcome back to my studio. If you like working with coloured pencils and would like to know more about layering, this is a great tutorial for you. It doesn't matter if you don't own all the coloured pencils, and you don't have to have the expensive brands of coloured pencils you keep reading about. You can just use what you own. And if you don't have a lot of time, since we know that coloured pencil projects can be so time consuming, this is perfect because this entire project just took 2 hours. I sketched in my design using a 6H pencil, which is a hard pencil that only leaves a fine line, but it's a good idea to lift your pencil lines a couple of shades lighter before you start using coloured pencil, because they are a transparent medium and your lines can show through and be difficult to erase later on. A kneaded eraser rolled into a sausage shape can do that evenly and quickly, but I have left mine a little heavier than I normally would so that you can see exactly what I'm doing on camera. I start with the coloured pencil part of the eye to really bring things to life, and I begin by establishing the main shape. It's easier if you're new to coloured pencils to work bigger. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but it really does. It allows for room for error, and it also gives you space to fit everything in without cramming. Keep your edges crisp. For the pupil, I'm using a Payne's grey, not a black. And I'm leaving the highlight as there's a reflection of clouds in the sky. I always like to use a colour chart before I get going so that I know what the colours are going to look like. It really saves time in the long run and it takes out any of the guesswork. I recommend any time you get a new set of coloured pencils to do a swatch test of all of your colours. It's so much easier than looking at the outside of the pencil and trying to figure out exactly what it's going to look like once it's applied, because often it's not the same as the colour on the casing. Coloured pencil doesn't erase easily, and it's always good to prepare. Artwork isn't just about practicing or having some talent that some of us might have and some of us might not have. If you prepare well and you use the correct tools and techniques, you can really save a lot of time and also produce some fabulous results that are difficult to achieve otherwise. This drawing can be completed with just 9 pencils and 1 or 2 graphite pencils and a couple of erasers. I'm using Faber Castell Polychromos pencils, but whatever you own will work. All pigments will layer just fine. You can even use good old Crayola pencils if that's what you own. So with coloured pencils, it's all about layers, lots and lots of layers. Coloured pencils are slower medium because of the build-up of those layers, and the key is to use a light pressure. So this means at times you're going to want to almost barely touch the page. I'm leaving the paper mostly untouched where the areas are white. Now the beginning part of a drawing is the hardest part, so it's really important to pay close attention to the reference and look at that reference as much or more as you would the drawing. It's important that I preserve the lighter parts of the eye. I can lift colours with a kneaded eraser, but it's difficult to completely remove all of the pigment back to the original white of the paper. It takes practice to go lightly. A student of mine thought that she was going really lightly, but was going in with medium pressure. So it's just a bit of a learning curve. Grazing the paper, seeing hardly any pigment whatsoever is light pressure. And you can see by my movements that I'm going in the direction of the eye patterns, and that's really important too. While colours are really an important consideration when creating a piece of artwork, with coloured pencils you can add colours together to get exactly the right shade that you want. Even if you have all the pencils in the world, chances are you're not going to have enough colours available to pick exactly the right one every time. And anyway, that's not that important. There are lots of colours in the eye here, but they are blended together to produce different shades, even though I'm only using 9 different colours. So essentially I'm mixing colours as if I'm working on a palette, one layer over the next. I'm using Strathmore Bristol Smooth paper. It has a lovely surface for coloured pencils, it's widely available and it's really inexpensive, and you can achieve a lot of layers with it. The full-time version of this eye with complete narrated voiceover from start to finish and complete with reference and line art is available on my brand new Patreon page, and I've listed that below. Notice all of the reflections of the eyelashes coming in from the top. It's important to add those in, and later I'll add in all of the clouds in the sky that are reflected in there too. The thing that eats the pencil most is unnecessary sharpening. After your initial outlines are created with a sharp pencil, it's just not necessary to keep pencils really sharp at all times. If you're using, say, Faber Castell Polychromos for instance, then these are hard pencils and they rarely lose their point. Obviously I'm not using blunt pencils, but to the naked eye from any distance for viewing, we're not going to notice all of those sharp edges. We're just going to be able to notice if the drawing looks like a human eye or not. Being consistent with your sharpener is important so you're not wasting pigment reshaping points all the time. Electric sharpeners can really eat pencils. Notice unevenness in the eye patterns. In nature, nothing is truly symmetrical. As I said, I only used 9 pencils in this exercise. If you're layering, you can blend colours while you go to create the different variations of the shades that you want. Too many choices is limiting and also debilitating. What is necessary is getting the correct contrast. No amount of colour or detail can make up for a drawing that doesn't stand out like it should. The one thing that makes a drawing look realistic is contrast. So you must make sure that your darks are really dark enough, and it's a common mistake to leave a drawing unfinished. Don't abandon it too early, as usually the issue is that it just isn't finished. Almost everything can be worked with more contrast. Take a photo of your cell phone of your drawing and then change it to black and white, and then do the same for the reference and look at them both side by side. Mostly what it's lacking is depth. And black isn't necessary to create contrast. Black makes artwork look flat and dead. I achieved good contrast in this drawing with Payne's grey and dark blue. Pale greys help to blend out colours as well as add pigment, and grey pencils are your best friend. They're in eyes, they're in fur, they're in lots of birds, they're also in lots of skin tones of all different kinds, so always keep lots of greys around. Pale greys are great, but be careful of using too much dark grey as it tends to age animals and humans. I almost always blend my greys with other colours. I'm now ready to move on to the graphite section of the eye, and I'm just using an HB and also a 5B pencil. These are softer pencils than the Sketching 6H, and this is a nice contrast in values between the HB and the 5B. And I'm going to be using some blending stumps to aid with transitions, to blend, and also to create shadows. And I love using blending stumps. They're indispensable tools for graphite work. They've got sharp points, so using a little bit of graphite in there goes a long way when you want to spread some around to create shading. I can also create lines with them. Obviously, the first part of the graphite section is establishing the outline. My favourite pencils for graphite work are Faber Castell 9000 series. It might seem like all graphite pencils are the same. Isn't graphite just graphite? But this brand hardly needs any sharpening and has a very hard lead, so you rarely need to sharpen while you work. I used a blending stump to pick up some graphite and use that to draw with it just like a pencil. I can use it on its tip, or I can use it on its side if I want to cover large areas. By the way, to prevent smudging, which is going to happen more with graphite than it is with coloured pencils, rest your hand on a sheet of computer paper or wax paper, or preferably glassine. I like glassine as it's transparent, so I can see my work underneath. I like using blending stumps as tools because using them means I don't have to have all of the different softnesses of various pencils at my disposal. I can just spread that graphite around as if I had more pencils than I'm actually using, and a little bit of it goes a very long way. Blending with them, though, does take a little bit of time. When it comes to eyelashes, you want to commit to your line and make sure that the lashes are haphazard. Once you start drawing eyelashes, you will see quite how random they really are. This model was wearing quite a bit of mascara, so I added some thick clumps to show that in the drawing. Now, you don't have to follow each and every eyelash with the reference, but do follow the shape of them, making them thicker at the base and thinner at the end. Some of them are so thick that they need a second line. And eyelashes go in many different directions, but make sure for the sake of realism that you add those tiny hairs in there as well. Eyelashes, by the way, are added at the end rather than halfway through the eye, as it's easier to get the shading in without anything getting in the way. There are many curving reflections in the eyelashes within the eye as well, so make sure that you add all of those in too. And you want to sharpen your pencils for the lower lashes before you begin them. There's also quite a lot of mascara in those lower lashes too, so I've added some tiny little dots and added some little tiny clumps in there as well. So take your time with this part and enjoy the process. I like to use an applicator to create shadowing for the upper eye area. I use the applicators made by a company called Soft, and that's spelled S-O-F-F-T, and they make wonderful tools for blending. But you can use unused eyeshadow applicators if you want. I'm using some graphite powder and just adding a little depth with the pigment of the graphite. Then I can go in with the graphite to create base shadows. This applicator gives more of a polished look than the blending stump, and it can also cover a larger area as well and create shapes. If you find working on eyebrows intimidating, you can always practice on a spare piece of paper first. Starting in the middle is easier and then working out from there. This is the thicker part. I know I don't want to go up too high. I know I can also use crisscross motions, and everyone's eyebrows are different, and just like the eyelashes, they're random in shape. So I want to establish the main shape first. I use more graphite powder to soften the eyebrow hairs and to create some shadows. And I go in carefully here as I don't want to add too much. Look at your reference to see where the eyebrow begins and ends. Pay attention to the direction of the brows, as in which direction the hair grows, especially at the very end. Eyebrows are more sparse towards the very end. So I'm going back and forth with my pencil strokes. Before completing my drawing, I add a lot more contrast to the whole of the eye area, that darkening that I was talking about earlier. Taking a break from working on your artwork allows you to see what you might have missed earlier and what requires more attention. This is the most important part of the drawing, and it's just not worth rushing. There's a fine line between adding and overworking, but remember that contrast is the key element here to really creating an eye that pops and stand out. So I add some more coloured pencil work, more depth, I add more hairs to the eyebrows, and I keep assessing as I go. And all the time I'm shielding my hand so as not to create any unwanted smudging. And the last tool that I like to use is called a Tombow Mono Zero eraser. And this little tool is literally the best thing since sliced bread, as it has an amazing ability to be able to carve out and erase tiny sections. So it's perfect for the edges of the eyebrows, and I use this little tool in all my graphite work. It's only about $5 and it's a huge time saver as well as immensely satisfying to use. And my trusty kneaded eraser cleans up all the other parts of the drawing. By the way, please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and hit that little notification bell if you want to stay alerted to all of my upcoming tutorials on this channel. Thank you so much for watching, and as usual, I'll see you in the next video.